My name is Ruby Johnson, and I am 60 years old. Some days, I feel every one of those years in the creak of my bones, in the way my hands stiffen when I hold the broom or scrub dishes. Other days, I feel younger than I am when my children laugh or when I remember the joy in their faces when they were younger. But most days I just feel tired. I live in a small house in the heart of Atlanta, in a neighborhood where the houses are old and the paint on the walls is peeling. It's not a neighborhood that many people choose to live in. It's a place where the sidewalks crack, where cars line the streets like forgotten promises, and where the sound of sirens is as familiar as the smell of Sunday dinners wafting through the air. But this place, despite its brokenness, is home. I never thought life would take me down this road. When I married my James all those years ago, I was filled with dreams. Dreams of a home full of laughter, of children running through the yard, of love that never faded, even when the world outside seemed to be changing. But as the years went on, those dreams started to fade. James, my husband, the father of my children, passed away 5 years ago. Just like that. One day he was here, strong and tall, the backbone of our family, and the next he was gone, leaving only memories and the weight of responsibilities he couldn't take with him. So there I was, 55 years old, with 3 children, no husband, and a future that seemed as uncertain as the day James died. And yet I wasn't going to let go. I couldn't. I had no choice. My oldest son, Chris, was 17 at the time. He had big dreams of his own, dreams of getting out of this neighborhood, of becoming something bigger than all of us. Then there was Emily, my quiet daughter, only 14 but wise beyond her years, with her head always buried in a book. And my youngest, little Marcus, only 8, his smile still wide and innocent, his laughter like music to my ears, even when I was exhausted and feeling broken. I had to do it for them. The world doesn't hand out second chances to people like me. A woman, 55, a black woman, in a neighborhood where opportunities are as scarce as a snowstorm in August. My chances were few, but I made do. I worked, and worked, and worked. I found myself in the kitchen every morning at 5 a.m., making breakfast for the kids, packing them off to school, and then heading to the diner down the street where I served coffee to people who didn't even look up when I poured it. I didn't mind, though. I learned early in life that you don't complain about the small things when there are bigger battles to fight. After the diner, I would spend my afternoons cleaning houses or doing laundry for people who didn't need to ask twice. But like I said, I didn't mind. Each dollar I earned was one less that I had to worry about not having. Sometimes I'd walk down the street, carrying my grocery bags in the heat, the sun beating down on my back, and think about what kind of life I had given my children. Were they better off now, or was I failing them? I'd catch Chris's eyes sometimes when he thought I wasn't looking. His stare was different. He wasn't the boy I used to know, the boy full of wonder and hope. He looked at me like he was waiting for something more, for something to change, but nothing ever changed. Emily, she was quieter. She'd come home, sit at the kitchen table, read her books, and say little. I think she saw the worry in my face and didn't want to add to it, but that's the thing with children. They're not stupid. They know when things aren't right. They know when the lights flicker on and off and when the cupboards are emptier than they should be. And then there was Marcus, the youngest. His laughter, his energy. It was a balm for my weary soul. But even I could tell that he was starting to notice things, too. He would sometimes look up at me and ask, "Mama, when is Daddy coming back?" I had to swallow the lump in my throat every single time and tell him that Daddy was never coming back, and I'd force a smile. A smile I didn't always feel, but you do what you have to do for your children. But the thing about life, the thing you never expect, is that no matter how hard you try, no matter how many hours you put in, how many times you smile through the exhaustion, you can't change the fact that things are hard. You can't escape the fact that dreams are often only that, dreams. And then Chris. He started acting out, getting into trouble, skipping school, saying he didn't want to work with his hands like me. He didn't want to be stuck in this neighborhood forever. He wanted to escape. I understood. But that didn't make it easier. One evening after dinner, when the air was thick with tension, Chris said something that made my heart drop. He was upset about the money. He always was. "Why do we have to live like this, Mom?" he asked, his voice sharp, angry. "Why can't you just let me go? I can make it out there, I swear. I can make something of myself. We don't have to live like this anymore." I looked at him then, really looked at him, and I saw the frustration in his eyes. The same frustration I had in my heart, but I couldn't show it. I couldn't show him that I didn't know how to give him the answers he needed. "Chris," I said softly, "I know you're tired, I know you want more, but we don't get to choose what life hands us. We just do the best we can with what we have." He threw his napkin down onto the table. "I'm not asking for your excuses, I'm asking for a chance." His words stung, and though I wanted to scream, wanted to tell him how hard I worked to give him that chance, I didn't. I just sat there, feeling the weight of everything settle on my shoulders. It was the first real conflict we'd had. I knew it wouldn't be the last. And so, like every night before, I went to bed tired. My mind racing, thinking about the future, about the choices I'd have to make for all of us. This was the beginning of the hardest years of my life, the years where everything would feel like it was slipping away, even though I fought like hell to keep it all together. But as every mother knows, no matter how hard things get, you keep going, because you have to. You keep fighting, no matter how dark the days may seem, because that's what mothers do. And in the end, that's what I would continue to do. Because as much as I feared losing everything, I knew that as long as I had my children, there was still a chance. A chance for us. A chance for something better. The morning light barely filtered through the cracked blinds, casting long shadows across the floor. I could hear the soft shuffle of my feet against the cold hardwood as I moved through the familiar motions of the day. I started every morning the same way. Coffee for me, breakfast for the kids, and a quick prayer under my breath that the day would go smoother than the one before. Marcus was the first to stir. His little voice called from his room, "Mama, where's my shoes?" I stepped into his room, finding him tangled in blankets, his eyes still heavy with sleep. I helped him out of bed and set him down, watching him bounce around, his usual morning energy so contagious I couldn't help but smile, even in my own exhaustion. Emily, my quiet one, was already in the kitchen, a book in hand as she munched on toast. She had a way of getting lost in those pages, always far away, even when she was right there beside me. I let her be. Sometimes, it was easier not to ask what was going on in her mind. I knew the world wasn't easy for her either. Then there was Chris. He wasn't in the kitchen like he usually was, trying to rush through breakfast to get to school. No, today he was nowhere to be found. I glanced at the clock, frowning. He was always up by now. I walked to his room, knocked gently on the door. "Chris!" No answer. I pushed the door open slowly. He was there, sitting on the edge of his bed, his hands on his head, staring out the window. His backpack was lying on the floor, untouched. "Chris, you're going to be late." He didn't move, didn't respond. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched. It wasn't like him. I took a step closer, sitting beside him on the bed. "What's going on, son? You okay?" He didn't look at me. His voice came out low, tight, almost as if it was hard to force the words out. "I don't want to go to school today, Mama." I nodded slowly. "Why not?" "I'm just tired of it, that's all," he muttered, his frustration coming through, raw and unfiltered. "I don't see the point anymore. It's not like any of this is gonna matter." I could feel the weight of his words hit me in the chest. My son, my firstborn, the one who used to be full of dreams, was now questioning everything. And I didn't know how to make it better. I reached out and placed a hand on his shoulder, giving it a gentle squeeze. "I know it's tough, Chris, but school is important. I know you don't always see it, but it's the way out. It's the key to something better." He finally turned to me, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite decipher. "What better, Mama? What better than this? I'm stuck here, working my ass off just like you, barely scraping by just like you, and I'm never going to get out. I'm never going to be anything more than what I am right now." His words hit hard. They weren't just words. They were a reflection of the hurt and frustration he'd been carrying inside. He was angry, angry at the world, angry at me, angry at everything that had shaped his life, and I couldn't fix it. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself, trying to find the right words, but nothing felt right. "Chris," I said softly, "I know it feels like you're stuck. Believe me, I know. But this is not where we're meant to stay forever. This is just a part of the story, not the end. We just have to keep pushing forward. We have to make it count, son." He stood up abruptly, shaking his head. "You don't get it. You've always been okay with it. With this life, you never complain, but I'm not you, Mom. I can't just accept it." I felt my chest tighten. "I'm not asking you to accept it, Chris. I'm asking you to survive it, to keep your head up no matter how hard it gets. That's all I'm asking." He turned away, pacing in the small room. "You don't get it. You just don't get it." I watched him helpless. There was so much I wanted to say, but I knew deep down that the words weren't enough. He needed more than advice. He needed hope. He needed to see something more than what I could offer. "All right," I said, my voice tired. "Get to school, Chris. We'll talk later, okay?" He didn't respond, but after a moment he grabbed his backpack and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I stood there, alone in his room, feeling the weight of it all. It wasn't just Chris, it was everything. The house, the bills, the never-ending struggle to keep everything together, to hold it all up, even when I could feel the cracks starting to show. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't fall apart. I had 3 children who depended on me. And no matter how much I wanted to scream or cry or just lie down and give up, I had to keep going. I had to be strong. For them. I walked back into the kitchen, where Emily was sitting quietly, her book forgotten, her gaze fixed on me, as though she knew what had just happened. She was a smart one, my Emily, always watching, always thinking. "Everything okay, Mama?" she asked softly. "Yeah, honey," I replied, forcing a smile. "Everything's fine." But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I spent the rest of the morning preparing lunch for the kids, trying to keep my hands busy. My thoughts kept returning to Chris. What was happening to him? What was I missing? Was I failing him? By the time I dropped Marcus off at school and made my way to the diner, I felt a dull ache in my chest that wouldn't go away. I knew I had to keep moving, but part of me wanted to sit down and just rest, let the world keep turning without me for just a moment. The diner was busy, like it always was during the lunch rush. I slipped behind the counter, greeted by the familiar smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee. I threw on my apron, wiped down the counter, and began taking orders. It wasn't much, but it was steady. It kept the lights on and food in our bellies. But as I served my customers, I couldn't stop thinking about my son. At night, when the house was quiet and the kids were in bed, I sat by the window, the weight of the day pressing on my shoulders, my heart heavy with worry for Chris. He was angry, and I didn't know how to fix that. I wanted to help him. I wanted to make him see that things would get better, that he could have a better life. But the truth was, I didn't know how. All I had was my love and my faith. And I prayed every night that somehow it would be enough. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog. I'd wake up, go through the motions of the day, cooking, cleaning, working, always with a quiet dread hanging in the back of my mind. Chris didn't say much anymore. He'd come home late, go straight to his room, and stay there, barely acknowledging me. I tried not to show how much it hurt, but every silence between us felt heavier than the last. The diner was crowded that Friday afternoon, the lunch rush hitting harder than usual. I kept my head down, taking orders, refilling coffee cups, and pretending that everything was fine. I had a rhythm by now: step, repeat, take a breath, keep moving, but inside I was restless, anxious. I'd been hearing whispers at work. The regulars, people who came in day after day, noticed Chris's mood. They noticed his absence in the mornings, his lack of energy. I knew they meant well, but I wasn't ready to face the questions. "Ruby, is everything all right with your boy?" One of the regulars, an older woman named Mrs. Henderson, asked me after I refilled her coffee. She was sweet but nosy. I forced a smile, wiping down the counter with more force than necessary. "He's fine, just going through a phase, I suppose." Mrs. Henderson raised an eyebrow as if she knew better. "Well, don't let him slip away, dear. They grow up too fast. You don't want to miss it." I nodded, but the words didn't settle right with me. I couldn't help but feel that Chris wasn't just going through a phase. He was on the edge of something, and I had no idea how to pull him back. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house was silent, save for the occasional creak of the old floorboards and the hum of the refrigerator. I stared at the wall, my hands folded on the table, too tired to even think. And that's when I heard it, a soft knock at the door. I frowned, surprised. Who would be knocking this late? I didn't expect anyone. I stood up slowly and walked over to the door, my mind racing. When I opened it, there stood Henry Miller. He wasn't someone I knew well, but I'd seen him around. Henry was one of the wealthier men in the neighborhood, successful, well-dressed, always driving a shiny car that seemed out of place among the weathered buildings of our street. He was a businessman of some sort, someone people looked up to, even if he kept to himself. His tall figure filled the doorway, and his expression was unreadable, his eyes tired. He looked like he had something important to say, but wasn't sure how to begin. "Ruby," he said, his voice a little hesitant, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." I stepped back, a little confused. "Henry, what brings you here?" He shifted on his feet, clearly uncomfortable. "I've been watching your son, Chris, and, well, I know this might seem strange, but I think he's in trouble." I blinked, taken aback. "Trouble?" I repeated. "What do you mean?" He glanced around, lowering his voice as if the shadows might hear. "I've seen him walking around town. He's been spending time with some of the older kids in the area. Not exactly the best crowd. I just wanted to let you know. I didn't know who else to talk to about it." A cold chill ran down my spine. My heart sank. I had suspected something wasn't right, but hearing it confirmed was a punch to the gut. "Chris," I whispered, almost to myself. Why would he do that? Why didn't he come to me? Henry seemed to read my thoughts. He stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "Ruby, he's angry, I can see it, and he's lost. Sometimes, kids like that, they turn to the wrong people because they feel like they don't have a choice. It's not easy to talk about, but you need to get to him before it gets worse." I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "He won't talk to me. I don't know how to help him." Henry looked at me, his gaze steady. "You have to find a way to get through to him. You're his mother. You can't give up on him, Ruby. I've seen what you're capable of. He needs you, even if he doesn't know it yet." I felt a lump form in my throat. My eyes stung. I had been holding it together for so long, but now, with someone else's words echoing in my mind, the reality of it all hit me. My son was slipping away, and I didn't know how to stop it. "Thank you, Henry," I managed to say. "I don't know what to say, but thank you for telling me." He nodded, offering a small, reassuring smile. "Just remember, Ruby, you're not alone in this. Don't try to carry it all yourself. You've got people around you who care." And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing in the doorway, my heart heavy, my mind racing. I shut the door and leaned against it, closing my eyes. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything bearing down on me. The next morning, I found Chris sitting at the kitchen table, his backpack by his side. He didn't look up when I walked in, didn't say a word, but I knew he was waiting for me to speak first. "Chris," I said softly, my voice shaking slightly, "we need to talk." He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he pushed his chair back and stood up like he was ready to leave. I'm fine, Mom. I don't want to talk. I reached out, my hands trembling. No, son, we're going to talk. He froze for a moment, his back to me. Then, finally, he turned around. His eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in a while, fear. What's there to talk about, huh? I'm just tired, Mom. Tired of pretending everything's fine. Tired of pretending like I'm not stuck. I could feel my heart break all over again. This was it, the moment I had been dreading. I stepped forward, slowly, carefully. Chris, I don't have all the answers. I don't know how to fix things, but I need you to know that I'm here for you. I'm always here, even if you can't see it right now. He looked at me for a long moment, his gaze hard and defiant, but I saw something else in his eyes, something soft, something vulnerable. It was a crack in the armor he'd been wearing for so long. He sat back down at the table, his shoulders slumped. I don't know if I can believe that, he muttered, but his voice was quieter now. I don't know if I can believe in anything anymore. I took a deep breath, then sat down across from him, letting the silence stretch between us. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all you can ask for. A start. The days after that conversation were a mixture of tension and silence. Chris didn't exactly open up, but he didn't shut me out completely either. He would eat his meals at the table, his eyes often distant, his mind somewhere far from our cramped kitchen. It was a fragile truce, one I didn't fully understand, but it was something, and for now, that was enough. I kept trying to bridge the gap between us, one small step at a time. I'd ask how school was going, but he'd shrug it off. When I noticed he hadn't picked up his laundry, I'd fold it for him. Nothing felt like the son I used to know, the one who'd come home with a crooked smile, excited to tell me about his day. It was as if I was talking to a stranger, a person who wore Chris's face but not his spirit. Still, I tried. Even when I wanted to scream at him for being distant, for hurting himself with the anger he couldn't let go of, I kept my voice calm. He needed me to be steady, even when I felt like falling apart. One afternoon, after I finished my shift at the diner, I stopped by the corner store on my way home. My tired feet dragged along the cracked sidewalk, the weight of the day settling deeper into my bones. The store was small, but it had everything I needed: bread, milk, canned goods. I wasn't buying luxury, just enough to get us through another week. As I walked down the narrow aisles, my thoughts turned back to Chris. I couldn't get him out of my mind. He hadn't been himself lately, and I knew something was wrong, something bigger than just his frustration with school or life. But what was it? What had changed him so completely? "Ruby?" A voice broke me from my thoughts. I turned around to see Henry standing at the end of the aisle, holding a basket of groceries. His usual air of confidence was gone, replaced with something more vulnerable, something I couldn't place. "Henry," I said, surprised to see him here. "I didn't expect to run into you." He gave me a small, apologetic smile. "I hope I'm not intruding. I just wanted to check in. On you, I mean, how's Chris doing?" I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. "Not much better, I'm afraid. He's distant, more than usual. I don't know what happened to him." Henry looked at me carefully, his eyes softening. "You've been through a lot, Ruby, but I've seen kids like Chris. They don't always know how to express what they are feeling. Sometimes it comes out sideways. Sometimes they start to spiral before anyone notices." I nodded slowly, my mind swirling with the possibilities of what could be happening to my son. "I can't help him, Henry. I don't know what to do anymore." "You're doing the best you can," he said, his voice steady. "But maybe he needs someone outside of you to talk to. Sometimes, when a kid is struggling, they need to hear it from someone who's not a parent, someone who's been through their own struggles." I didn't know what to say to that. I'd always prided myself on being everything to my kids, the one they could turn to for anything. But the truth was, Chris didn't seem to want to turn to me anymore. Henry must have seen the doubt in my eyes because he took a step closer. "I know this isn't easy, Ruby. I'm not saying it's going to fix everything, but there's a youth center not far from here. It's a place where kids can get some space, talk to someone who understands what they are going through. I swallowed hard, feeling something shift inside me, a mix of hope and fear. You think that'll help him? Henry hesitated before nodding. It's worth a try. Sometimes kids just need a place where they don't feel judged, where they can talk freely. Maybe it'll help him open up. I thought about it for a long time. Was I really going to take this step? Was I willing to let someone else into Chris's life, someone who might be able to reach him in ways I couldn't? I finally nodded. All right, I'll look into it. Thank you, Henry. I don't know what else to do. Henry smiled again, his expression softening. I'm here if you need anything, Ruby. Don't hesitate to ask. I watched him leave, his figure disappearing around the corner. I felt something inside me, an odd mix of relief and fear. Maybe I was making the right choice, or maybe I was just grasping at straws, too afraid to face the reality of what was happening to my son. Later that evening, after dinner, I sat down with Chris. The house was quiet, the sound of the television playing faintly in the background, but the weight between us was palpable. I knew I had to talk to him, had to let him know that I wasn't giving up on him. Chris, I said gently, my voice steady despite the turmoil in my chest. I've been thinking about what you said the other day, about wanting to leave all this behind. He didn't look up from the table, his eyes focused on the plate in front of him. You don't get it, Mom, he muttered. I can't keep pretending everything's okay. I took a deep breath, gathering the courage I knew I needed. I'm not asking you to pretend, son. I'm asking you to let me help you. I know you're struggling, and I know you don't want to talk to me about it, but I want you to know that you don't have to go through this alone. Chris looked up at me then, his eyes filled with frustration, but also something else. Something I hadn't seen in a long time, vulnerability. I don't know how to fix this, Mom, he whispered. I don't know what I'm supposed to do anymore. My heart broke a little at the sound of his voice, the pain so raw and real. Chris, we don't have to fix it all tonight, but I'm here. I'm always here. I know you're hurting and I can't take that away, but I want you to let me in. Let me help you carry some of it. There was a long pause, a silence that felt like it could stretch on forever. And then, finally, he nodded just slightly, like he was giving in to something he hadn't wanted to admit. Okay, Mom, he said quietly. I'll try. That was all I needed to hear. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a step, a small one, but a step nonetheless. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. The days after that small breakthrough felt strange, quiet, but different. Chris wasn't exactly cheerful, but he started coming home earlier, sitting with me during dinner without looking for a reason to disappear into his room. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it was a start. He seemed to be letting me in, just a little bit at a time, and I took that as a sign that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't losing him. One afternoon, after I finished my shift at the diner, I found him sitting on the porch when I got home. His legs were stretched out in front of him, his sneakers kicked off, and he was staring out into the yard like he was trying to figure something out. The afternoon sun was beginning to dip, casting long shadows over the grass, and the heat of the day was starting to fade. I hesitated for a moment before stepping outside, not wanting to interrupt his thoughts. But I knew I couldn't wait forever. The silence between us still had that weight, like it might snap at any moment. Chris, I said gently, taking a seat beside him on the porch steps. He glanced at me, then back out at the yard. Hey, Mama. I settled in beside him, feeling the worn wood of the steps beneath me, a familiar comfort in the midst of everything. You okay? I asked, trying to sound casual, though I could hear the concern in my own voice. He shrugged, the movement almost too subtle to notice. I guess I've been thinking a lot lately, about everything. My heart skipped a beat, thinking that was something new. For the first time in a while, it felt like Chris was actually processing things, not just pushing them aside. I nodded, keeping my voice steady. What about? He hesitated for a long time, then spoke quietly. I don't know if I can keep pretending, Mom. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I don't know what I'm supposed to be. I took a deep breath, careful to keep my emotions in check. This was the moment I'd been waiting for, the moment he might actually say what had been eating at him. You don't have to have all the answers right now, Chris. None of us do, but we're in this together, okay? You don't have to carry all of this alone. He turned his head toward me, his expression more open than I'd seen in weeks. I just feel lost, like I'm not where I'm supposed to be, like I'm stuck. And no matter how hard I try, nothing seems to change. Nothing feels right. I could see the frustration in his eyes, and it hit me hard. He was scared that he was never going to figure it out, that everything he wanted might always be out of reach. That feeling of being trapped, it wasn't just his problem. It was a feeling I knew all too well. Chris, I said, my voice softer now, I know how that feels. I've felt like that too, but I want you to know something. Being lost isn't the end of the story. It's just the middle. It's just the part where you find your way out. And no matter how long it takes, you will find your way. He didn't say anything for a long time. We just sat there, letting the silence settle around us. But this silence was different from before. It wasn't suffocating or uncomfortable. It felt like we were finally beginning to understand each other again. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can get out of it, Mama. I don't know how. I turned toward him, my heart breaking a little for the pain I could hear in his voice. You don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to have everything figured out. Just take one step at a time, and I'll be right here with you every step of the way. He looked at me then, really looked at me like he was searching for something in my eyes. After a moment, he nodded, just a small tilt of his head. Okay, he said, his voice still uncertain but stronger than before. I'll try. That was all I needed to hear. The next few days felt like a slow unraveling of the walls Chris had built up. He started coming home earlier, eating dinner with us, even helping out around the house without being asked. It wasn't a dramatic change, but it was a change. A small one, but it meant everything to me. One evening, I came home from the diner to find Chris sitting at the kitchen table, his homework spread out in front of him. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him. This was the son I knew, the one who used to sit here, scribbling away at his assignments, asking questions about everything under the sun. Need help with anything? I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He looked up at me, surprised but not annoyed. Nah, just math. It's kind of a mess, though. I smiled, walking over and pulling out the chair across from him. Let's take a look. Maybe we can figure it out together. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I sat down beside him, working through his homework together. We didn't talk much, just small exchanges about numbers and fractions, but it felt like the world had shifted a little bit. Like maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way back to each other. The next day, I took a step I hadn't planned on. I reached out to the youth center Henry had told me about. I wasn't sure what would come of it, but I knew I had to try. If Chris was going to open up, he needed somewhere he could be himself, somewhere he wouldn't feel judged or pushed. I made the call, set up an appointment, and told Chris about it that evening. I was nervous about his reaction, but I knew I had to give him the choice. Chris, I said, sitting down next to him, I made a call today. There's a youth center a few blocks away. They have counselors, people who can help with what you're going through. I think it might be a good place for you to talk about everything that's been on your mind. He didn't look up from his phone at first, his fingers still scrolling through the screen. I don't need therapy, Mom, he said flatly. I felt a pang of disappointment, but I didn't let it show. I'm not saying you do, but it might help to talk to someone who isn't me, just to see if it makes a difference. He was silent for a moment, then he finally looked at me, his expression unreadable. I'll think about it. I nodded. That's all I'm asking, Chris. Just think about it. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe we weren't done yet. Maybe Chris wasn't too far gone. We still had a long road ahead of us, and I knew it wouldn't be easy. But with each small step, We were slowly starting to build something again, something stronger than what we had before. Maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way back to each other. The days following my conversation with Chris felt like the calm before the storm. I wasn't naive enough to believe everything would magically fall into place. No, the weight of the past still lingered between us, heavy and unresolved. But there was a shift. A small one, but it was there. Chris was trying in his own way, even if it didn't always show. And that was enough for me, at least for now. He agreed to go to the youth center. The decision came as a surprise, but it was the push we both needed. After weeks of walking on eggshells, of trying to reach him without breaking him, he finally spoke. It wasn't grand. He didn't come running to me with excitement in his eyes, but he didn't shut it down either, and that was progress. "I guess it wouldn't hurt to check it out," he said one evening after dinner. His tone was casual, but I could tell there was something softer in it. Maybe a hint of relief, or maybe just curiosity. But whatever it was, it made my heart leap. "That's all I'm asking for," I replied, trying to sound as calm as I could, though my insides were doing flips. "We'll go together. I'll take you, all right?" He gave me a look, part skeptical, part resigned, and nodded. "Yeah, all right." The morning of the appointment, I found myself awake before the sun, pacing around the house, trying to get everything ready. I had told myself 100 times that I wasn't going to overdo it, that this was Chris's moment, not mine. But still, I couldn't help it. I wanted this to work. I wanted him to see that there was a way out of the darkness he was trapped in, a way that didn't involve running from everything. Chris was quieter than usual as we drove to the youth center. The radio hummed in the background, the city slowly waking up around us. He stared out the window, lost in his thoughts, and I didn't push him to talk. Sometimes, silence said more than words ever could. The youth center was tucked away in a corner of the neighborhood, a small building that didn't look like much from the outside, but I'd heard good things about it. The walls were lined with posters, colorful artwork drawn by the kids who came there, and I could see a few teens gathered around the front entrance, chatting casually with the staff. We stepped inside, and Chris took a deep breath, his shoulders stiffening slightly. It wasn't a huge deal, but it felt like one. For him, for me. I was about to let him walk into something unfamiliar, something that could either help or push him further away. "Come on," I said gently, nudging him forward. "It'll be fine." He shot me a quick, uncertain look, but then sighed, pushing his hands into his pockets as he followed me inside. A woman at the front desk greeted us with a smile. "Hi, you must be Chris. I'm Lee," she said warmly, extending a hand to him. She looked about my age, maybe a little younger, but there was something in her demeanor that immediately put me at ease. "We're glad you're here today. Are you ready to get started?" Chris hesitated for a moment, but then gave her a stiff nod. "I guess so." I felt my heart thud in my chest as I watched them interact. Chris was always guarded around new people, especially strangers. I could see the wall he put up, the way he tried to mask his uncertainty with indifference. But Lee didn't seem fazed. She smiled softly, like she'd seen it all before, like she knew exactly how to handle it. "You're in good hands, Chris," I said softly, trying to sound reassuring. "I'll be right here waiting for you, okay?" He looked at me for a moment, and I could tell he was trying to find the right words. Then, with a slight nod, he turned and followed Lee down the hallway, disappearing around the corner. I stood there for a moment, staring at the empty space where he had just been, my chest tight with a mixture of hope and fear. Would this work? Was he really ready to open up, or was he just going because I asked him to? The thought lingered in my mind, and I pushed it away, focusing instead on the fact that this was a step. A small, yet significant step. I sat in the small waiting area, staring at the walls lined with more artwork, trying not to let my nerves get the best of me. I glanced at the clock on the wall. It felt like an eternity before Lee returned. She smiled at me as she walked in. "He's doing great," she said. "We just talked for a bit, and he seems open to the process. I think we'll be able to help him." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You really think so? Lee nodded. I do. He's not as closed off as he might seem. There's a lot going on, but he's in the right place. We'll give him the space to open up when he's ready. Relief washed over me, and I allowed myself to smile for the first time in days. Thank you, I said quietly. Thank you for giving him a chance. Lee gave me a knowing smile. It's all part of the process, but don't worry, you're doing the right thing. I nodded, still in a daze from the weight of it all. Chris had taken the first step. I had to believe that this was the start of something better for him, for us. When the session ended, Chris came out looking a little less tense, his eyes a little brighter, though he still wasn't ready to talk about what had happened. As we drove back home, he stared out the window again, his expression still unreadable, but I didn't push him, not yet. The next few days passed slowly. Chris continued going to the center twice a week, and little by little I saw glimpses of the boy I had missed. He didn't talk much about his sessions, but I noticed he seemed a little more present at home. He even started helping out with Marcus when I asked, something he hadn't done in months. One evening, after he came back from the center, he walked into the kitchen where I was preparing dinner. You know, he said, his voice more casual than usual, I think I'm starting to get it. What you meant about being stuck. I think I'm figuring out how to move past it. My heart swelled with pride. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like I was hearing my son again, really hearing him. You don't have to figure it all out at once, I said softly. Just take it one step at a time. You're doing great. Chris didn't respond, but he gave me a small smile before heading off to his room. It wasn't much, but it was everything. It wasn't just about the youth center. It was about him starting to realize that he didn't have to carry his burden alone. And that, in itself, was a victory. The weeks that followed felt like a slow unfolding, a quiet transformation that I could barely put into words. Chris was still Chris, still full of contradictions, still trying to hold onto the pieces of himself he thought he had lost, but he was different. He was present, more present than he had been in months. He started talking more, even when it wasn't about the things I thought mattered. It was in the little things, a conversation about school, a comment about a song on the radio, or a brief exchange when he helped me chop vegetables for dinner. It was like a dam inside him had cracked open just a little, allowing the flood of emotions he had buried for so long to trickle out in the smallest ways. And I didn't force it. I didn't ask questions he wasn't ready to answer. I just let him be. That was the hardest part, honestly. Letting him figure it out. Letting him take the lead, even if it meant I had to sit back and wait. For a long time, I had been the one pushing, the one trying to fix everything. But I realized slowly that this wasn't something I could fix for him. This was his battle to fight, and all I could do was be there when he was ready to talk. One Friday afternoon, just after I returned from the diner, I found Chris sitting on the porch again. This time, his legs were pulled up, his arms wrapped around his knees, and he was staring into the distance. It was quiet, the kind of silence that didn't feel like discomfort, but like something deeper, something that was settling. I hesitated before stepping outside. Chris, I called softly. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. The usual walls were still there, but I could see something in him that hadn't been there before, a flicker of hope, or maybe just the hint of peace. It was hard to say, but it was something. Hey, Mama, he said, his voice quieter than usual. I've been thinking. I nodded, taking a seat beside him on the steps. The old wood creaked beneath me, but I didn't mind. It felt familiar, safe. About what? I asked, trying not to sound too eager. Chris didn't answer right away. Instead, he let out a deep breath, running a hand through his hair. It was the first time I had seen him like this, vulnerable, open. And I was patient, letting him take his time. I don't know, he said after a while, almost to himself. I guess I've been trying to figure out why I've been so angry. I thought it was just because things sucked, because everything felt unfair. But it's more than that. I felt my heart tighten in my chest, unsure of where he was going with this. "What do you mean?" I asked, keeping my tone gentle. Chris shifted, his fingers nervously tapping on the step beneath him. "I think I've been angry because I didn't know how to handle everything that happened, with Dad, with everything that's been going on." His voice cracked a little, but he quickly cleared his throat, pushing through the emotion. I felt the sting of those words. Dad, it had been years since James had passed, but the weight of his absence still hung in the air, like a shadow that never quite left. "I didn't know how to deal with it, Mama," Chris continued, his voice thick with regret. "I thought if I just kept pushing everyone away, maybe it would hurt less, but it just made it worse." I wanted to reach out to comfort him, but I knew he wasn't asking for that yet. He wasn't ready to be held, so I kept my distance, letting him speak, letting him process. "I was angry because I felt like I couldn't be who you wanted me to be," he said quietly. "I thought if I didn't act like everything was okay, then maybe I'd get noticed. Maybe you'd see that I wasn't just following the rules, doing what I was supposed to. I wanted to be something more than what you expected of me, but I didn't know how." My heart shattered at those words. All I had ever wanted was for Chris to be happy, to feel supported, but somewhere along the way I had failed to see the cracks in his heart, the places where he felt like he was losing himself. "I didn't know I was doing that, Chris," I said softly, my voice thick with emotion. "I just wanted you to be okay. I didn't want you to carry all that pain alone." He nodded slowly, his eyes downcast. "I know, Mom, but I guess I wasn't okay, and I didn't know how to tell you." We sat in silence for a long moment, both of us letting the weight of the past hang in the air between us. It wasn't an easy silence, but it was one I could live with. For the first time, I felt like Chris was starting to really see himself, and maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see me too. Finally, I spoke. "It's okay to not have all the answers, you know that, right? You don't have to be perfect, you just have to keep trying." He looked at me then, his eyes softening. "I know, and I'm trying, Mom. I really am." And that, right there, was all I needed to hear. The next few days felt like a continuation of that moment on the porch. Small changes, quiet shifts in our routine, but they were there. Chris was more present, more open. He came home after school, sat at the kitchen table without me having to ask, and even started talking about his day. Small things, like a joke he'd heard in class or a new kid he'd met. I noticed, too, that he was spending more time outside, helping me with chores, offering to take Marcus to the park, doing things he hadn't done in what felt like forever. It wasn't that he was fixed. It wasn't that everything was magically better, but it was progress. And then one evening after dinner, Chris said something that caught me off guard. "I think I'm ready to go back to school tomorrow," he said, his voice steady. It wasn't a huge thing, but it felt like one. Chris had been skipping school off and on for the past few months, the weight of his anger and confusion making it hard for him to focus. But this felt different. This felt like a step forward, like he was finally starting to fight for himself again. I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "I'm proud of you, son, I really am." He shrugged, trying to play it cool, but there was a softness in his eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. "Thanks, Mama, I'll do my best." And that was enough for me. That small shift, his decision to face the world again, to take on the day, was everything. It wasn't the end of the struggle, but it was a start. And sometimes that's all we need. Chris's decision to go back to school felt like a victory, a quiet triumph in a battle that had stretched on for far too long. It wasn't just about school, it was about his willingness to try again, to not let the weight of everything that had happened crush him. It was about him finding a sliver of hope, even if it wasn't clear yet what that hope looked like. The next morning, when he woke up early for school, there was something different in the air. He wasn't dragging his feet like he had before, his face clouded with dread. Instead, there was a quiet determination in his movements. He ate breakfast without complaint, grabbed his bag, and kissed Marcus on the cheek as he headed out the door. "Have a good day, Chris," I called after him, my voice thick with pride. He turned just before closing the door and gave me a small smile. "I will, Mom, I promise." It wasn't a huge shift in his behavior, but it was a significant one. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was seeing my son again, the boy who had dreams, who cared about his future, who still believed he could be something more than the pain he'd been carrying for so long. The days that followed were a mix of ups and downs, as they often are when you're rebuilding something broken. Chris didn't magically transform overnight. He still had his moments of frustration, still struggled with the weight of everything he'd kept bottled up inside. But every day, he seemed to make a little more progress. He came home from school, did his homework without being asked, and even started spending time with Marcus again, laughing and playing like the older brother I knew he could be. And then, one afternoon, a breakthrough came when I least expected it. I was in the kitchen, preparing dinner, when Chris came in from the backyard, his expression unreadable. I turned, wiping my hands on a towel, and saw the look in his eyes. It was a mixture of frustration and something else, something that made my stomach tighten with unease. "Chris," I said cautiously, setting the knife down, "what's wrong?" He hesitated for a moment, his gaze flicking to the floor before meeting mine. "I need to talk to you about something." I nodded, my heart picking up pace. "Of course, what's on your mind?" He let out a long breath, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know how to say this. I've been going to the center, and I'm glad I went. But there's something I've been holding back, something I've been scared to admit." My heart skipped a beat. "What is it, Chris?" He bit his lip, looking down at his hands as if they held the answers to everything. "I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared that I'm not going to be enough. I'm scared that I'm going to mess up again, that all of this, me going back to school, going to the center, trying to be better, it's not going to matter. That I'm just going to fall back into the same place I was before." His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. Instead, I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing gently. "Chris," I said softly, "you don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have everything figured out right now. The fact that you're trying, that you're facing your fears instead of running from them, that's what matters. You're not going to mess up because we're in this together, and we'll keep fighting through it one day at a time." He looked up at me then, his eyes softening, his face less guarded. For the first time in a long while, I saw the boy I used to know, vulnerable, yes, but also hopeful. "I'm trying, Mom. I really am," he said quietly, and that was enough. In that moment, I knew he wasn't giving up. He was just scared, like anyone would be when they were facing the unknown. But he wasn't backing down, and that was a promise I could hold on to. The next few weeks continued in the same way, slow, steady progress. Chris went to the youth center every week, and though he didn't always talk about what they discussed, I could see a change in him. His eyes were brighter, his posture a little straighter. He was carrying himself differently, like he believed in something more than just surviving day to day. One evening, after he came home from a session, I was sitting in the living room, reading a book when Chris came in, his face thoughtful. He sat down next to me, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he opened up without me prompting him. "I talked to Lee today," he began, his voice quiet. "She asked me about Dad. I told her everything, how I felt when he died, how angry I was, how much I missed him." I looked at him, my heart heavy with understanding. "And how did you feel afterward?" He paused, thinking it over. "I don't know. I think it helped." I didn't realize how much I was holding onto until I said it out loud. It felt, I don't know, like I could breathe a little easier. I placed my hand on his, the connection between us feeling stronger than it had in months. "That's a big step, Chris. I'm proud of you." He smiled softly, the weight in his eyes lighter than before. "I'm starting to think maybe I can be okay, you know? Maybe I can still figure this out." "Of course you can," I said firmly, my voice full of conviction. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, but I promise you you're not alone. I'm here, and so is Marcus. And Emily, we're all in this together. The words felt like a promise, one I had been making to him silently for years, but now, in this moment, it felt like we were truly beginning to believe it. Slowly, piece by piece, we were rebuilding what had been broken, and it wasn't easy. There were still nights when I worried, nights when I wondered if I was doing enough, if I was saying the right things. But for the first time, I didn't feel so alone in it. We were finding our way back to each other. The next day, Chris came home from school with a new determination in his step. He didn't mention it, but I could see it in the way he held his head high, the way he walked through the door like he was claiming a small victory. I wasn't sure what had changed, but I knew it was something real. And as I watched him settle into the couch with Marcus, laughing about something silly, I realized that, even though the road ahead was still long, we were heading in the right direction. We were building new foundations, not just for Chris, but for all of us, one day at a time. The rhythm of life had started to settle into something that resembled normalcy. For the first time in what felt like a long time, the house didn't feel so heavy. There were still struggles, still moments where the past seemed too close to the surface, but each day Chris seemed a little more at peace, a little more himself. And that was enough. I could see the change in the way he spoke to me, less guarded, more willing to listen, and most importantly, more willing to share his thoughts without me having to pull them out of him. It wasn't always easy, and he still struggled with his own doubts, but I could feel the weight lifting off his shoulders, piece by piece. One evening, after dinner, I found myself in the kitchen alone, wiping down the counters and letting the quiet of the night settle over me. Marcus and Emily had gone to bed, and Chris was in his room, probably catching up on homework or lost in his thoughts. I was still amazed at how much had changed in the past few months. It hadn't been a miracle, but it had been progress, slow, steady, real progress. As I was about to finish cleaning up, I heard the sound of footsteps behind me. I turned to see Chris standing in the doorway, his expression soft but unreadable. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly, his hands shoved into his pockets. "Can we talk?" I put the rag down and turned to face him, wiping my hands dry. "Of course, what's on your mind?" He stepped into the kitchen and took a seat at the table, his gaze fixed on the floor for a moment before meeting my eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about everything." I could feel my heart rate pick up. It wasn't uncommon for Chris to have these deep, introspective moments, but there was something different about the way he spoke this time, like he was ready to face something he'd been avoiding. "I'm listening," I said, sitting across from him. He hesitated for a moment, then spoke, his voice low but steady. "I think I'm ready to take a step. I've been thinking about college, about what I want to do after school." I stared at him, surprised. College? It had always seemed like a distant dream for Chris, something that belonged to other people, not someone like him. But there it was, that spark in his eyes, the one that told me he was serious. "I don't know exactly what I want to do," he continued, his voice quieter now. "But I've been thinking maybe I could go into something with cars or engineering. I don't know yet, but I know I don't want to just stay stuck. I want to have a future, you know?" I couldn't hide the pride in my heart. It wasn't about the specifics, whether he became an engineer or a mechanic or anything else. It was about him finally believing that he could build a future, that he could be more than the pain he had carried for so long. "Chris, that's amazing," I said, my voice full of emotion. "I'm so proud of you. You don't have to have it all figured out right now. The fact that you're thinking about the future, that you're planning, that means everything." He smiled a little, a genuine smile, one I hadn't seen in a long time. "I know, it feels different, you know? I don't feel like I'm dragging myself through life anymore. It's like I'm actually moving forward." "That's because you are," I said softly, leaning across the table to give him a reassuring look. "You've been moving forward all along, even when it didn't feel like it. Every step you take, no matter how small, is progress." Chris nodded slowly, taking in my words. For a moment, we both just sat there, letting the quiet settle between us. The weight of everything, of the struggles, the fears, the doubts, wasn't gone, but it felt lighter somehow, like we could breathe easier together. "So," he said after a moment, his voice a little more playful, "if I do end up going to college, I guess I'll need a little help with the applications, huh?" I laughed softly, the sound of it filling the empty kitchen. "Of course, I'll help however I can." We spent the next few hours talking about options for school, about what kind of future he envisioned for himself. It wasn't a conversation full of grand plans or promises, but it was a conversation of hope, of possibilities. For the first time, I could see it, the future. It wasn't distant anymore. It was within reach for both of us. A few weeks later, things continued to improve. Chris kept up with his schoolwork, and though the road to his future was still uncertain, I saw him approaching it with more confidence, more determination. I noticed him talking more with Marcus, helping him with his homework, even teaching him how to play basketball in the driveway. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was enough. I could feel the old Chris coming back, piece by piece. And then, one Saturday morning, after breakfast, he came to me with something in his hand. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice a little hesitant. "I signed up for a college prep class. I thought it might help me figure things out more. Is that okay?" I smiled, my heart swelling with pride. "Of course, it's more than okay. I'm proud of you for taking that step." "I want to get it right," he said quietly, his gaze steady. "I don't want to just coast anymore. I want to try." And there it was again, that spark, that glimmer of hope, of belief in himself, that I hadn't seen in so long. He was trying, and that was everything. Later that day, as Chris worked through his new prep class materials, I found myself sitting in the living room, reflecting on how far we'd come. It wasn't a perfect journey, but it was one that we were walking together, one step at a time. I could see a future for Chris and for me and for all of us. It wasn't clear yet, but it was there, just beyond the horizon. And I knew that, whatever came next, we would face it together. No more pretending, no more running, just moving forward one day at a time. Spring arrived quietly in Atlanta, the air fresh and crisp, as if the city itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The trees outside our window had begun to bloom, their flowers bright against the blue sky. I would often sit by the window in the mornings, a cup of coffee in my hands, watching as the world woke up around me. Everything was starting to feel different, lighter, somehow. Chris had been attending his college prep class for a few weeks now, and each day, I saw him change a little bit more. He'd come home with new ideas, new goals, and an eagerness to learn I hadn't seen in years. For the first time, he was starting to look ahead instead of behind. His eyes weren't clouded with the same frustration that used to define him. Now, when he spoke about the future, there was something else, hope. I tried not to let myself get too ahead of things, but the more I saw him commit to his goals, the more I started to believe in the future he was building. We still had obstacles to face, financial struggles, the weight of the past that sometimes crept in, moments when fear and doubt would try to hold him back. But those moments felt smaller now, like they no longer had the power to define him. That Saturday afternoon, we sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window, casting a warm glow across the room. Chris was reading through some of his prep class material, his brow furrowed in concentration. I watched him for a moment, his focus intense, and couldn't help but feel proud. I'd never thought I'd see this day, this quiet moment where he was choosing his path, not just waiting for it to unfold. "Hey, Mom," he said suddenly, his voice breaking the silence. He looked up at me, his expression thoughtful. "I think I know what I want to do. I want to go into engineering. I've been looking into it, and I think I'd be good at it." I leaned back in my chair, my heart swelling with pride. "Engineering? That's a big decision, son. What made you choose that?" Chris shrugged, a small, almost embarrassed smile on his face. "I've always liked fixing things, figuring out how stuff works. I like the challenge, and I think I can make a difference. I want to build things, you know, create something that lasts. I could see the spark in his eyes, the excitement of someone who was finally starting to believe in their own potential. This wasn't just about a career, it was about him finding purpose. And that was more than I could have hoped for. "That's wonderful, Chris," I said softly, my voice full of emotion. "I'm so proud of you. Whatever you need, I'm here to help." He nodded, the smile growing on his face. "Thanks, Mom. I really appreciate everything you've done for me. I couldn't have done this without you." I stood up and walked over to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You've done it, Chris. You've worked for it. I just helped you see what was always there." He grinned, his eyes lighting up with a mix of pride and gratitude. I guess we both did. The rest of the day passed in a blur of excitement and plans. We talked about college applications, about scholarships, about the work it would take to get there. But for the first time, it didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt real. It felt possible. That evening, after dinner, we sat down as a family, Chris, Marcus, Emily, and me, and we talked about what was coming next. We talked about Chris's goals, about the steps he would need to take to reach them. It was a conversation I hadn't expected, but one I'd been silently hoping for. Marcus was excited for his big brother, asking questions about engineering and what it would be like. Emily, always the quiet one, offered her support in her own way, giving Chris a smile that said more than words could express. For the first time in a long time, it felt like we were a family moving forward. Together. The road had been hard, no doubt about it, but we were starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And with every step Chris took, I felt the weight of my own fears and doubts begin to lift. A few months later, the day Chris had been waiting for finally arrived, his first college acceptance letter. The envelope was thick, official-looking, and when it arrived in the mail, I could feel my hands tremble as I handed it to him. His eyes were wide with anticipation as he tore it open. He read the letter in silence, his face unreadable, and then, slowly, a smile spread across his face. "I got in, Mom. I got in," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Tears welled up in my eyes as I crossed the room to hug him. "I knew you would. I'm so proud of you, son." We held each other for a long moment, the weight of everything we'd been through, the pain, the struggles, the doubts, finally lifting. It wasn't just about this moment. It was about everything that had led to it. Chris had found his way, and I had found my faith in him again. It was the beginning of a new chapter for both of us. And this time, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about living, about building a future, about finding hope in the places where we had once thought it didn't exist. The summer passed quickly, and soon enough, Chris was preparing for his first semester at college. I watched as he packed his bags, his room slowly emptying of the things that had once defined it. The small house, the one that had felt so heavy for so long, was now filled with a new energy, hope, excitement, anticipation for what was to come. On the day he left, we stood in the driveway, the car packed to the brim with his things. He turned to me, his eyes full of emotion, and for a moment I saw the boy I had always known, the one who had been too afraid to dream, the one who had carried so much weight on his shoulders. And then I saw the man he was becoming. "I'm going to miss you, Mom," he said quietly. "I'm going to miss you too," I replied, my voice thick. "But I'm so proud of you. You've worked so hard to get here, and this is just the beginning." He nodded, his eyes shining with the same determination that had carried him this far. "I'll be back, Mom. I'll make you proud." "I already am, Chris. You already have." He hugged me tightly before getting into the car. As I watched him drive away, a flood of emotions hit me. My son was off to college. He was chasing his dreams, making his own way in the world. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was watching him step into a future full of possibilities, just as I had always known he would. This was only the beginning. The house felt different after Chris left for college. The silence was deeper, the kind that only settles in when someone you love is no longer around. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was the kind of quiet that comes with growth, with the knowledge that the people you love are exactly where they need to be, stepping into their futures, just as you've always hoped they would. I found myself in the kitchen one morning, sipping my coffee, watching the sunlight flood through the window, and I couldn't help but think about how far we had come. The years had been hard, but they had also been full of lessons and love and rebuilding. There had been moments of doubt, moments where I wasn't sure if we'd make it, but here we were on the other side of it, stronger, more connected than I had ever imagined we would be. Marcus and Emily were both growing too. Marcus had taken up an interest in baseball, a sport I never expected him to love, but there he was, practicing after school every day, his face lit up with excitement whenever he hit the ball just right. Emily, my quiet one, had found her voice in her art. She spent hours drawing, her sketchbook filled with images of everything she saw in the world, everything that sparked something inside her. And every time I saw her lost in her drawings, I was reminded of how much we all had yet to discover. And then there was Chris. I kept in touch with him through texts and calls, hearing about his new life in college, the friends he was making, and the challenges he was facing. He was adjusting, finding his place, and each time we spoke, I could hear the pride in his voice. He wasn't the same boy I had seen so lost just a few months ago. He was stronger, more confident. He was becoming the man I always knew he could be, and it filled me with more pride than words could express. It was late in the evening when I received a message from Chris that changed everything. The message was simple, just a few words, but those words hit me in a way I hadn't expected. "Mom, I just wanted you to know I got my first internship at a local engineering firm. I can't believe it. This is real. I'm really doing this." Tears welled up in my eyes as I read the message. This was it. This was the moment I had always hoped for. Chris wasn't just dreaming anymore. He was living it. He was creating the future he had once thought was impossible. I sat there, staring at the message on my phone, a lump in my throat, a mixture of joy and disbelief swirling inside me. He had done it. He had stepped out into the world, taken those first steps toward his future, and now he was starting to build it, brick by brick. That night, as I sat in the quiet of the living room, reflecting on everything that had happened, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The struggles, the pain, the moments of doubt, they were all part of the journey, and they had brought me to this point, to this place of understanding, of gratitude. I thought back to all the times I had wondered if I was enough, if I had done enough for my children, for Chris, for the life we had built. But now I saw it clearly. The sacrifices, the late nights, the tears, they had all led to this moment. My children were thriving. They were becoming the people they were always meant to be. And that, in the end, was all I could have asked for. I had spent years trying to hold everything together, trying to fix what was broken. But in the process, I had learned something important. I had learned that it wasn't about fixing it all. It was about being there, showing up, and believing that no matter how hard things got, we would make it through. Together. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that has happened, I want to take a moment to thank you all for reading this story, for allowing me to share our journey with you. Life is full of challenges, but it is also full of hope. We all have our struggles, our moments of doubt, but the most important thing is to keep moving forward. To never give up on yourself or the ones you love. I want to thank my family, especially my children, for being my heart, my strength, and my reason to keep fighting. And to all of you out there, I wish you nothing but health, happiness, and love. May your journeys be filled with light, may your hearts be full, and may you always remember that no matter how hard the road gets, there is always a way forward. Take it one step at a time and keep moving forward. You'll get there. I promise. Thank you.